Thank you, Kim, and thanks everyone for being here this morning. My story begins as a personal story, but evolved quickly into a community and ultimately a county story. And it's really going to focus on two phrases that you've all heard: NIMBY, and if you want to change something, run for office. And the NIMBY part actually was a positive. How I got engaged in Charles County politics began in my community, Swan Point, which is located on the Potomac River. And as you can see from the photo behind me, which is an aerial shot of Charles County is surrounded by almost 300 miles of shoreline. The Potomac River on one side, the Patuxent River on another, and a lot of major tributaries. So the health of the environment, and specifically the water, is very important. So I got involved in my Swan Point Homeowners Association, which usually deals with what you would expect homeowners associations to deal with: basketball hoops in driveways, screen doors that aren't painted the correct color, and things along those lines. But when I became the president of that association, things changed. And the reason it changed is just upriver from us, in full view on the Potomac, is the Morgantown coal plant, which generates electricity. Now, I'm going back, Kim said that my environmental life began a long time ago. It really wasn't that long ago. We're talking about 11 years ago, when Morant, who was then the owner of the coal plant, wanted to expand. And living in Swan Point, 4 miles from the plant, we were already dealing with soot on car windows, soot on porches. So we were seeing the direct results of burning dirty coal. So Swan Point is a pretty conservative community, and this is where I get into NIMBY. So it was really my job to engage folks who wouldn't ordinarily be activists as for why this is bad. And for the first hearing on the expansion of Morant, we got 200 people to show up at a local Public Service Commission hearing on the expansion plans. So the expansion plans, part of it was a good thing. Maryland had passed the Healthy Air Act in 2006, and Morant was going to have to reduce the bad emissions. The bad part about that is they were going to install a scrubber, which would help reduce those, but would result in a really ugly plume that would really ruin the viewshed, especially for those coming in to visit Maryland over what is the 301 Harry Nice Bridge. My way of selling this was, you're welcome to the New Jersey of Maryland. And folks were unhappy about that. In addition, Morant wanted to build a barge facility, and this is, 11 years later sounds really funny or ironic or something along those lines, because they wanted to start importing coal instead of bringing it in from the usual domestic locations like West Virginia and Kentucky. They wanted to import coal from Venezuela. So they proposed building this barge facility, which was going to jut out into the river and have all of these barges with coal going up and down the river, and no doubt spilling a whole lot of it into the river. And then finally, part of the scrubber project was going to use massive amounts of groundwater. And in Charles County, the aquifers were already reaching their tipping point. So much so that in 2009, the Maryland Department of the Environment claimed that at the current rate, we were going to be in trouble with the aquifers by 2030. It's 2019 now, that's getting closer. In 2009, it still was, close enough on the horizon. So we fought them. It was not a complete victory, but as I mentioned, we had some unlikely allies, the Swan Point residents. They called foul to the state, and then we raised a lot of money. Swan Point's a relatively prosperous community, and I was amazed how much money residents were willing to put in to fight this. So the barge facility was built. It was used once. There was one shipment of coal from Venezuela, and then the combination of just attitudes about coal and the economics about coal made that, just not worthwhile for them to continue. It's kind of interesting because then I started getting involved in testifying before the state and the county. And the county was very upset with me and the people who were joining me because Morant was the biggest taxpayer in Charles County. And they felt that I was threatening, the tax rolls of the county. So we fought. We lost on the barge facility, but we did make a major victory on the water. Public Service Commission determined they cannot use groundwater, and they gave them two choices. One was either to use gray water or treated water from a sewer facility, or the other option was a desalinization plant from the Potomac River. With the Potomac up here is fresh water, down in Charles County it's brackish, so it had saline in it and would have to be cleaned to be used. So here's where my political career really began. Gray water was definitely a better option because we still don't know what impact desalinization plays on the river in terms of the fish population and all, and it was all ready to go. And then the county decided, because Morant wouldn't pay for the whole thing themselves, that the county would not chip in. And so desal is what happened. And I started appearing before, as I mentioned earlier, county commissioners and the like, and I was amazed how amateurish they were and how in the pocket they were of the coal company, the electric company, as well as developers who were also wanting to strip the environment in Charles County. Charles County has, for those who don't know it, it used to be a very rural community. In the last 30 years, the population of the county has gone from 90,000 to 170,000. So that should give you a pretty good idea on the kind of growth we're talking about. It's now a bedroom community of Charles County. Half of our population commutes out of the county every day. So infrastructure is an issue. And so all of these projects were just adding to the stress of the county. And then, as I mentioned, Swan Point is on the Potomac River. And someone was visiting me because they wanted to see what the smokestacks looked like. And they said, this would be a great place for a wind turbine because I was completely surrounded by water. And so I tracked down a company actually located here in Frederick called Potomac Wind Energy. They came down and they said, God, this is great. Go get your permits. Well, county was where I had to get my permits, and the county put up a roadblock every step of the way. And then suddenly I decided I'm going all out. I'm going to make them pay for this, and then I'm going to take them on. My background is in the news media and media relations. And so when I came up with this idea to build this windmill on the Potomac, I put together a brief multimedia presentation, and I sent it to the Washington Post. A reporter at the time who covered Southern Maryland, Philip Rucker, some of you may be more familiar with him today. He's the White House bureau chief of the Post and an MSNBC contributor. Well, he said, can I come down tomorrow with a photographer? And I said, Phil, there's no windmill. He said, I know, but can you see the towers from your house? I said, okay. So he came down, photographed me with my wife sitting out, in our property with smokestacks behind us. And then a couple of weeks later, we wound up on page 1 of the Washington Post. And hence, a whole media thing began. So after going through the county to try to get permits, and as I said, trying to block us all the way, the county attorney finally called me and said, this is going to take new legislation because we've never had a windmill in Charles County. And basically, they were attempting to just stall me in any way they can, to which I don't know where it came from, but I remembered that we have an Amish community in Charles County. And what do they have on their properties? Windmills. So I said, if you can approve it for the Amish, you can approve it for us, even if the purpose is different. So again, we turned it into a big media event. We invited the Green Club from the local elementary school. When the county was haggling over how are you going to get all that heavy equipment out to your point, a friend said, why don't you just get a draft horse and have an Amish draft horse raise the windmill? Even though the horse wasn't really raising the windmill, we found a horse. And so the combination of kids and animals was something the media just could not resist. So we sent, contact information to all of the local print and broadcast media. We had several television crews. We had the Washington Post again. Channel 4 sent a helicopter down. So it turned into a real media circus. And again, front page of the Washington Post. And so, being in the news in that way was really creating awareness about the importance of the environment in Charles County. As I mentioned, it used to be rural. Now we're trying to protect as much of the rural that still exists. There's still fabulous forests, fabulous tributaries into the Potomac, breeding grounds for fish and fauna and flora galore. And so I decided that I was going to run for office. Now, I'd never done anything like this, but I figured, how hard could it be? Now, obviously, if you're going to run for office, you got to talk to your family. So I spoke to my wife and I said, would you support me doing this? At the time, I'm 54 at the time. That's pretty old to start a political career. And she said, I'll support you if I can run your campaign. And she's a marketing professor at GW. And she said, well, if I can teach marketing, I could be able to market you. So the first thing she did was she went to the G.W. Gelman Library and took out books on running a campaign. And so I think she took out 3 books, and every book began with the line, do not hire your spouse as a campaign manager. So we ignored that and moved on. And because of all the windmill exposure, I'd be in like the local Safeway and people would come up to me, they wouldn't know my name, but you're the windmill guy. And so suddenly I was sort of famous in a small pot or small pond. And so, okay, how do we, bank in on this? So we came up with the slogan, Winds of Change. And I ran against an incumbent, somebody who was a true good old boy. Charles County, because of the expansion of population over the past 25 years, went from being sort of a sometimes red, sometimes blue county to being a completely blue county. If you win the Democratic primary, you're winning the general election. So my goal was to defeat the incumbent in the primary. And between the winds of change and all of this publicity, and also really running a different kind of campaign. I'm not from Charles County, I'm from Brooklyn, okay? And that's very different for that community. And I was from Brooklyn before it was the coolest place on the planet, which apparently it is today. And by running a campaign of truly knocking on doors, we knocked on 6,000 doors. The universe at the time for the primary is 15,000 votes, so we basically literally touched about half of those, and we won. And what was amazing was I announced that I would not accept any money from corporations, specifically developers, and that really struck a chord with people. Even those who were living in developments, if you ask them, what's the last thing they want to see? Another subdivision. People had gotten tired of everything that meant in terms of quality of life, quality of the commute, quality of the environment, and people really started caring about the environment, especially in their backyard. And so I won, and there were 5 commissioners in Charles County, and in my first term I had 1 ally who felt the same way I did. I had 2 who definitely felt otherwise, that were very much supported by the development community. And I had 1 who initially was on the fence, but then went the developer way, and I wonder what happened. I can tell you that even after I won that primary in 2010 and made this big announcement about not accepting developer money, I got contacted by every developer in the county and beyond, figuring that now they can contribute to me. I won the primary, so I know how the game is played. Money does influence politics. We see it obviously at the national level. It probably has more of an impact on the local level. And so even though I was in the minority, being environmentally conscious put me in touch with a lot of people who I had not known. First of all, I learned a lot. You come into office, you think you know everything, and then you realize that you know pretty much nothing. That you really have to rely on staff, but but I inherited staff, and I inherited a culture that was not the culture that I wanted to be a part of. Charles County is very fortunate that the organization today known as Smart Growth Maryland, but at the time 1,000 Friends of Maryland, helped organize a coalition called the Smarter Growth Alliance for Charles County. And not that I agreed with everything that they brought to the table, they came organized with groups such as the Sierra Club, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and they were smart people. And even if I didn't agree, they could at least present their case. And so probably for the first time in the history of Charles County, they had a seat at the table. And as I mentioned, I was not in the minority, I was not in the majority, But because the environmental buzz was so strong, every 10 years you do a comprehensive plan, which lays out the land use for the next decade, or at the time it was the next every 6 years. And there was a plan that was supposed to be done in 2012, during my first term. The plan that was proposed, supported by the 3 majority commissioners, was horrible. And I thought it was just going to pass. I mean, there was nothing that my other colleague and I could do other than make a lot of noise. But also make noise in the sense that this was going to be political suicide for the folks who wanted to pass that plan. And literally 2 weeks before the 2014 primary, which was my re-election campaign, the 3 commissioners decided, we're not going to pass this horrible plan, we're going to kick it to the next Board of Commissioners, which was both the stupidest thing that they could have done from their own vantage point and the best thing that ever happened to Charles County. Because the following election, things changed. I'm listing here some of the things that happened in my first term, that we funded. The Maryland Welcome Center that the county runs is now run by a wind turbine, or at least partially. Also, we worked with the local electric company, SMECO, Southern Maryland Electrical Cooperative, to construct the first commercial solar facility in Southern Maryland. We lobbied the federal government, which resulted in the denial of permits, and this was really huge. There was a road to nowhere that the development community wanted to build called the Cross County Connector. It was going to go through some of the most environmentally sensitive lands in the state. And I really think that we played a role with the Army Corps of Engineers and the Maryland Department of the Environment in the political climate that existed at both the federal and state levels in 2014 to deny that permit. And that saved thousands of acres from horrible development. So then we had the second term, and probably because of the interest in the environment, I had 2 allies for the next 4 years. And I sat down with them and said, we don't know how long this is going to last. We have to do everything environmentally positive that we can in the next 4 years, and do it in a way that could hopefully make it very difficult for whoever succeeds us to change it. And basically that's what happened. And you know, Kim mentioned it in her intro, that Charles County passed what's probably the most progressive, comprehensive plan in the history of the state of Maryland. And it included establishing a watershed conservation district, which protects thousands and thousands of acres on the western side of the county from unbridled growth. It's not no growth. I'm not a no growth thing. Growth is inevitable, but it needs to be responsible. And that's the way I became commissioner, was to, you know, not be all or nothing. And that's why even when I mentioned in terms of dealing with those radical environmentalists that Kim represented, that you just don't listen, you know, you listen to everything, but you don't enact everything. But again, those were smart folks who really helped educate me, and also at times let me know, or I felt let me know, not everything needs to be done, that it's not all or nothing, that there, you know, people do live in the county. You can't just dismiss everyone, so you figure out ways to compromise. And I felt that this comprehensive plan and watershed conservation district did just that. In addition, we were able to create rural legacy districts. We have done things to protect the shoreline throughout the county. As I mentioned, 289 miles of shoreline. So over the years of ignorance, the amount of deterioration of that shoreline, especially as it relates to the coming changes with the climate, is, you know, is something you just have to deal with. And so we've moved in the direction of fixing the shoreline of Charles County. Some of you may have noticed, and this is a picture of Mallos Bay. Mallos Bay is a ship graveyard on the Potomac River near Indian Head. It was probably not the most environmentally sensitive thing that was done in 1918 at the end of World War I. But ships were built for the conflict, and then the conflict ended, and then the government went out and sunk all these ships in the Potomac. But they turned into these incredible reefs for wildlife in the Potomac River. And we just found out last week that after battling this for 5-6 years, Mallos Bay is going to be the first national marine sanctuary on the East Coast ever, and the first one issued anywhere in the United States in more than 20 years. and will help put Charles County on a map for responsible tourism. And someone in the previous presentation was talking about tourists. And to me, tourism, especially, cultural heritage tourism, ecotourism, what's great about that from a county or any government entity view is those folks come, they pay, they play, and they go away. And so basically that's the best kind of economic development. So getting back to where I started, use anything you have in your background. It gets really frustrating to deal with government, especially now. We see what goes on every day at the federal level. Hopefully that will change as time goes on. But it's really, the rubber meets the road at the local level. And if you've ever thought of running for office, or if not running for office, supporting someone to run for office, do it. It's hard, but it's not that hard. All you have to have is a thick skin. And the other difference between then and now is when I first ran, social media was kind of new and I was really taking advantage of it. Fortunately, I did it before it got really nasty. And that's why I would not let my wife ever look at my Facebook page. But I'm just so honored to be able to tell my story, to be able to have had the assistance of Preservation Maryland and Smart Growth Maryland. And we're all very lucky to have organizations like that in our state, and I thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, an honor to be here. Can any of you all do that? I'm really stiff. Can you do any of that? Have you ever seen your 8-year-old daughter do that? Well, my granddaughter is the inspiration of me running for mayor for the first time, and it was about 8 years ago, and I'm in my 3rd term. But like Ken, there was a burning desire that something was going to have to happen here in Emmitsburg. I lived down here for many years and was on the Carroll Creek Commission and then on the Planning Commission, but then moved up to a farm outside of Emmitsburg, and then we felt it was time maybe to move into a little bit more of an urban area, but a lot of things had to be done to this urban area. But if you look at this sign here, I think the first thing I want to preserve is a feeling of a sense of place. And the 1785 date, 10 years before I ran for office, there was a big debate. Is it 1757 or 1785? Two groups. I didn't live here at this time in Emmitsburg, but I'd go to the meetings, and they went back, and what they resolved is, well, you got this 1757 and 1785. Let's go to 1825, and that's when we were incorporated. So the first thing I did when I went back in office, I felt we needed to get back into the 18th century, because you're talking about lopping off about 40 years of really interesting things, like Mount St. Mary's was started during that time. Elizabeth Ann Seton started there. She's the mother of parochial schools, and so there's a lot of things that happened at that time. So within the first meeting, I said, we're going back to 1785. I'm going to propose that to my commission. And a lot of resistance, and then we went to the signage, put that in. I'm going to touch this. I hope it works. Okay. This is just some information. It's a little town. It's got whatever is it, 24/7, 365. We got 1,500 students here, and at Mount St. Mary's, the second oldest Catholic college in the country. And there we have a Homeland Security facility, which is a $40 million budget, and it's kind of a that's there. And then you have this huge basilica and this wonderful culture that likes to come, Catholic culture that comes to our town, and part of the 425,000 visitors here, but it's right downtown. But you got the Fallen Firefighters Administration. We got 20,000 firemen that come here. And I was in Alaska, and I saw a badge. I knew it was a fireman, so I went up and said, I'm the mayor of Emmitsburg. And everybody, all the firemen in the country know where Emmitsburg is. They're not sure what state it's in, but they do know that Emmitsburg. So it's really special. We have 2 museums, 2 archives. All this has, and a historic area. Just a little dab here, what do you call it? And Maryland Green Registry award was given to our town 2 years ago. And that was very important. We had a lot of competition for that, and we've gone for all these things. We're sustainable, Maryland certified, and last year we got a Gold Leaf Award from the International Society of Arboriculturists, and so we're very, very pleased with where we're going. Been going here. So we have this development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And that's being said, I have grandchildren. I really want something special to be there when they grow up and have grandchildren. And but as Ken mentioned, there's economics, there's social, and there's governance that comes into here, and it all has to play a part. There are so many variables that you have to go after a little bit. Nancy Pelosi had a wonderful statement I read in the paper, I guess a couple of weeks ago. It said, you may want to make beautiful pate, but here we make sausage. And that's a wonderful Maryland statement by Nancy Pelosi. And but I kept it here at Maryland 2.0. I didn't call it that just for this presentation I did, but reduce waste, reduce expenses, costs, reduce vehicle dependency. That was a stretch. They get that thing, get off the grid, electrical grid. And a lot of people concerned about that. And what do you mean enhance the public realm, which is connectivity in your parks and your facilities, and then protect the Emmitsburg watershed. We have 900 acres of watershed, and it's really special. This is all from somewhere else, but it tells you what, if I was a transformative agent, I had a little vision. It wasn't my vision. I barred and read and everywhere, followed all people all through the state and what they're doing. And then you have to develop a team. Then it has to connect with local, state, and federal. And it's all got to work together because they can, what goes up and down, money's moving around, and there's a lot of opportunities for your community to have education. I've written an appraisal course. I'm an appraiser by nature, and written a green appraisal course. I like that stuff, and I've got my staff where I want. It's a young staff, and down below I borrowed that statement. Impacts all decision-making, operating functions across organizations and sectors, but I stuck sustainability, and I'll use that later in the presentation. But it does, and it's got to permeate that. Are we really in this? Do you understand it, or is it, yeah, I got it. And right now, we have a terrific staff, and they're all in, bought in. Just some of the projects I'm going to go over real quickly that we've done. First thing, LED lights, low emitting diode lights, and installed in 2012. We own our light stands, and so it was easy for us to go ahead and, if the commission went along with me, to it'd be easy to go ahead and just do this. It made so much sense. So I got it through there, a lot of obstacles, but finally got through, and it came down to we maybe have $1 in it. We had a grant from, and we also had got a power company rebate. So for our investment and saving 60% since installation, we probably have $1 investment. It's there. And then just last month we're replacing 52 light fixtures and all the bulbs, and that just flew right through. So everybody's used to it. It's going to save us some money. Here is a big one, renewable solar energy. And this was hard to sell. And I'm glad we did it. I'm so proud of our town for doing this. We're six years we've been on renewable energy, 94% of all our town buildings. So I'm not competing with my residents. We're off, and you should get everything you possibly can on renewable energy as soon as possible. Is the responsibility of the government. I mean, everything like the high schools, everything should be on renewable energy to take the burden off, because it's a terrific burden. And that cost up there, I said, that can't be that high, but 12.25 or what it is, but that's from a government source, and that's what you really pay when you put, there's two kind of things. We can tax you, or we can make you pay user fees, and put all those together, and it's about $12.25 on average in the state of Maryland. This is our watershed, 900 acres, and part of a gift that was arranged. I played a part in that way before I was in office, and for the Conservation Fund, and they're a wonderful ally of Maryland. And so we have that 900 acres. We have a big lake, which is an impoundment for our water, and we've opened up a 15-mile multi-user trail up there. So we have a lot of things that are doing. Now we're farming. We're select cutting. The red marks are little places we're going to go cut over the next couple of years. This is kind of interesting. We're attached to it because of solar. We have that 11-acre, 330 gallon of water pond up there, but algae grows in it. I didn't know this. It settles at night, comes up in the morning. So this we're caught by solar, but what it's done, it kills the algae, and we don't have to backwash. Backwash is a process that you clean the water before you send it to your wastewater to your treatment plant. And so we're saving all that water, creeks, taps, and we're also not using any chemicals. Great reduction in that. Over here, we just put in an EV station up in town there, and within an hour of putting it open up, we had somebody come in. We're already on that plug-in or whatever it is that people know. It's a level 2, and that's our new car we just purchased there. It's all electric. I think it gets 120 miles per gallon or something like that. It's really a fantastic thing. And the other thing, this is something from Europe. We're the first one in the country, so we're a little nervous about doing it. But it took a while to get this over from England. But what it does, it blocks energy, electricity. I'll just simply is going at your system all the time, and you're charged for it. But if you block it off in front, it doesn't get there, so you're not charged for it. So it's a wonderful thing. But we're a little spooked by it because we're the only person that has it. But it saved us when we first put it in and tested about $21 for a 6-month period. So that's $4,000 or $5,000 we're saving there. This is our downtown, and this is really important to me. You see the picture on where's over my shoulder. That's what it looked like about 2 years ago. This is what it looks like now. And if you look across, first of all, you see a clock that was donated by Mount St. Mary's University, and it's commemorated as such. We have green on every corner now. We have the laminate brickwork there, but the real brickwork is in where people walk, the pedestrian thing. And that was what I ran on the first, basically, take back the square. We have a square. There aren't many squares in Maryland. I don't know of any on the west side. There may be some over in Easton or somewhere like that, but we have one. It's not an intersection, but it's worth protecting. Going beyond the clock, you'll see the red circle there. That is to commemorate a really romantic piece that was always there up until about 1939, a fountain. So we wanted to commemorate that. And if you look at the two buildings right behind the clock, the one on the corner, it's been repainted. The one in the middle's been repainted, the red one, and the one coming out is going to be repainted this fall. And we've gotten grants, 50% grants, and it's for facades, and they're and that's over almost $900,000 $100,000 in 8 years has been improved in the facades downtown. When you look a little bit further up the street, you'll see a garage opening. That's Vigilant Hose, the most visited fire department they say, in the world. And here we are. Now, what's 3.0? To me, I don't like to use the term climate smart. Like I've never used in our morning talk about greenhouse gases, but I feel comfortable with climate smart. And here's a couple of words up here: mitigation, avoid the unmanageable; adaptation, managing the unavoidable. And that's in terms of preservation. There's a lot of pressure coming at us on climate, and if you look down Maryland's primary risks, you have these items, and the ones I have in italic are what we had here. We've had them in the last week: extreme heat, extreme precipitation, and flooding. That's what seems to be banging us up here. And there's a wonderful course being taught through the state of Maryland with the American climate change officers. It's a pioneer course in the country. Only I think Colorado and Maryland have it to get all the people in the planning departments to go through this, and I've just finished that. So this is where we're going, and it's really special. And here's that saying down below: climate change impacts all decision-making and operating functions across organizations and sectors. So we're there, and if you're into preservation, what we want to preserve, we also want to preserve for our grandchildren. Now, if we don't do a lot of things, finish with this. We don't do a lot of things. I think the Earth will still be here, maybe like Venus, and the little tribes running around if we don't solve it in the 22nd century. But this is it. The world doesn't owe us anything. It was here first. And the wonderful things they're doing in Charles County, very exciting. And Frederick County's doing them too. And finally, the future is not a gift, it's an achievement. John F. Kennedy. And that we all have to bring that about. We can't depend on somebody else. Thank you very much.